Thank you for joining me today. My name is Vince, and we are in episode 9 of our playlist entitled End Time Bible Fulfillments in Sequential Order. Today we are going to be looking at Revelation chapter 8, and this is one that is a tough one. It is a big pill to swallow because 1/3 of the earth gets destroyed. Chapter 8 initiates the trumpet judgments. There are 7 trumpet judgments total, and in this chapter we will be looking at the first 4. So hang tight because this is a tough one. Let's do a quick review from our last video. In the last video, we ended up seeing the kingdom versus kingdom stage initiated. That's how the Gospels refer to this period. Kingdom versus kingdom, beginning a birth pang. Now you got to look at this from a Jewish point of view. Israel is limited in its involvement at this point, and where that involvement basically started was with the nation of Russia leading a confederacy of other nations down upon Israel to take spoil. Now, the problem that we have here is the idea that they had believed that it was the West that was behind the destruction of their forces who had fallen on the northern mountains of Israel and the fields outside Israel. So this is kind of pretty important here when we understand it doesn't matter whether God did the strike or whether Russia just thought these other nations did the strike, but we went into a further deepening of the conflict. And we find out that the people that had the toughest time with the nation of Russia coming down on Israel was the nations of the West. They are mentioned in Ezekiel 38 verse 13 as the merchants, which are talking about the Wall Street, and then it's talking about the place of Tarshish and all their young lions. Now this is kind of key because what that is talking about, if you look over here on the map, I'm circling around the UK and Ireland and maybe northwest Europe over here. That would include Celtic and Anglo-Saxon people. It was these people that are referred to as Tarshish. Now their young lions would make all their colonies inclusive, which would be something like a Canada, a United States, Australia, and New Zealand. And you say, well, wait a minute, those are separate nations. Yeah, we're separate nations, but we came from Tarshish, and we also not only came from Tarshish, but we always align ourselves with them whenever there's a typical war, as in World War I and World War II, and so will be with this future World War. The next thing that we notice is that God said he was going to send fire. He was going to send fire on Magog, which is Russia, this part of Russia over here where I'm turning the highlight at. And then it also said those who inhabit the coastlands in safety. The coastlands would be those outside of the Mediterranean Sea. So it goes beyond any area that's outside the Mediterranean Sea. So at this particular point, this was fire coming down on those two nations. But we find there were other nations also that are included because God said, I shall rain on him, Gog, and his troops. His troops could be spread out throughout the globe. And now many people who are with him. The many people that are with him would have included countries like Ethiopia, Sudan, Libya, Iran, Turkey, and some of the countries here with Russia and around Russia and Iran, right around the Caspian and Black Sea areas. So now we've entered this nuclear period, and here's we're going to pick it back up with the first trumpet shortly. Before we move on, we want to understand why the trumpet judgments must occur. And to do that, we're going to look at the first 4 verses of Revelation chapter 8. Now, I'm going to start with verse 1, and please keep in mind, this is an American Standard Version Bible I am reading from. It is generally the most accurate in terms of its translation from the standpoint that it doesn't add a lot of words. It just uses the words that are there. And this is what it says. And when he, it's talking about an angel, opened the seventh seal, there followed a silence in heaven about the space of a half an hour. Seventh is telling us now the selection process or the seals, the individuals that were operating in particular roles has been completed. In other words, God has already determined the judgments of people in the seven seals and the role they would play during the tribulation period. The silence in heaven here wants to show us something else. It shows us that heaven is not happy about what's about to happen. It's sorrowful and it's saddened. But it says the silence continued for the space of a half an hour. Now, this is kind of important because if it would have just said an hour, it would tell us that it was something unexpected. By using the space of a half an hour, it's telling us it's sorrowful, it's sad, but it's expected because of what is happening on earth. Now, in verse 2, John says, I saw the seven angels that stand before God, and they were given unto them seven trumpets. Okay, let's keep in mind seven, seven. There's always seven for completeness with God. It shows that certain aspects are done in a count. In the US, we use the decimal system, we count in tens, right? But in heaven, everything is in seven. Now, what is interesting about this is the fact that they were given seven trumpets. So this shows that permission is granted. In other words, even angels are implementing by God's will his authority, and they have to be granted the permission to be able to do it. Now, in verse 3, it talks about another angel. It says, another angel came and stood over the altar, having a golden censer, and there was given unto him much incense, that he should add it unto the prayers of all the saints upon the golden altar which is before the throne. Now let's talk about this. A golden censer, he stood over having a golden censer, right? And he's putting the incense in it. He's putting basically burning coals that are burning off a odor that is pleasing to God. The prayers of the saints are pleasing to God. So why this much happened is because God understands that the saints must be avenged, that God must answer the prayers of the saint because of what is going on earth that is unholy. And therefore, it is no difference what this is going to do. We will see in a short minute, but is going to have a cleansing effect of the tribulation period. Verse 4, the smoke of the incense with the prayers of the saints went up before God. In other words, it was pleasing to God, it was acceptable to him from the angel's hands. Now, if you haven't had a chance to subscribe yet, I would encourage you to do so. Perhaps consider giving this video a thumbs up so we can move it on to other people as well. And again, thank you for joining me. Let's keep going on now. Let's touch base on the impact of the seventh seal here. Now, the goal of the seven seals we will see is to cleanse. That is what the tribulation period is about. It is about removing what is unholy and establishing back into restoration things that are important to God, things that have God's purpose in mind. Now, in Revelation, verse 5 of chapter 8, it says, the angel taketh the censer and filled it with fire of the altar, and cast it upon the earth, and there followed thunders and voices, and lightnings, and an earthquake. This is our second earthquake. The first earthquake was mentioned when Russia fell on the mountains. Now, what is kind of important or vitally something to be recognized. Again, is there's a transferring, a transferring of judgment from heaven to earth. The same censer that was filled to show the prayers of the priestly saints, his believers in the body of Christ, now at this particular point, he's using that censer to bring fire. So the prayers are being answered with a judgment on earth, and it is cast down to earth, and it affects both the physical and the spiritual realm on earth. However, what we're seeing here is the effects on the physical realm. You will notice fire. We like this word fire because it comes up a lot in this particular study here. But fire does one of two things: it either refines or it purges what is dross, what is clean, and what is just there that doesn't belong to be what's pure. So what you have is you have our faith being refined by fire. In other words, God lets us go through our suffering, right, to bring us closer to Him. Yet at the same time, there's those who are going to be separated out, purged out of our group because they are unholy. Also, with these words, thunder, lightning, and earthquake, they show a wrath or a punishment. They're intended to show a removal of what is unclean or what is unholy. When these three words, thunders, lightning, and earthquake, are put together, we see it three times in Revelation here. There is two other times that it is used, but it is not used with the word voices. Voices has three purposes. It is to show anger, it is to show recompense, that is, prayers being answered, and in this particular case, it is to serve as a warning. And how do we know that? Because it is not in Revelation 11:19 or 16:18. And the reason for that is at Revelation 11:19 and 16:18, the purpose of these verses is to show final judgment. In other words, there's no more chance to be restored. People still have a chance by what's going on right now with the voices represented. There will be people that will come out of it and enter into God's 1,000-year reign on earth. Now here in verse 5 it says, and the seven angels that had the seven trumpets prepared themselves to sound. Because the censer was cast, because it was sent down to earth, now what we are seeing is the implementation of the trumpet judgments. Now the golden censer has entered on earth into the spiritual realm. This is going to result in nuclear war. We have keywords here that I put at the top of this particular slide, and it says hail, fire, blood. These are keywords that we want to pay attention to. They're in other places in the Bible, but I just took two verses here to point them out to you. In verse 7 of Revelation 8, here it says, talking about the first angel, the first sounded, and there followed hail, fire mingled with blood, and they were cast upon the earth, and the third part of the earth was burned up, the third part of the trees was burned up, and all the green grass was burned up. So on a third of the earth, we have this judgment. Now it's important to notice you have hail, fire mingled with blood. So you have those three words at the time. Likewise, in Ezekiel 38:22, where it is talking about not the earth in general, but a specific part of the earth, it says, with blood, there's our first word, I shall enter into judgment with him, God, and I shall reign on him, and this is talking about Gog's rule Russia, and on his troops, and on many of the people who are with them, a torrential rain with hailstones. So we have hail, and then fire, and then brimstone. So again, we have in that verse with blood, we have hail, those with hailstones, and we have fire. So we understand exactly what we're seeing here is when the first angel sounds his trumpet, there will be a nuclear exchange. And in that nuclear exchange, 1/3 of the earth specifically will be affected. Now in Revelation, here with the first trumpet, we found that 1/3 of the earth is likely to be burned up. What third would that be? Canada, United States, UK and Ireland, Russia, all the nations that participated with the Russians around them, Australia, New Zealand, these are all likely targets. However, we don't know for sure because we don't know until it happens. Now, what post-tribulation people believe, they believe that because there is no rapture, that the church will be protected during this time. And I would say that's a possibility, but what I would suggest to the church, if you are around at that time, consider the 144,000. And why should you consider them? Because they are God's representative to the Gentiles at that particular time. It just may be that they have a word to say to tell you what to do that you have to take by faith in order to survive during a time that 1/3 of the earth is about to be destroyed. A second trumpet sounds, and a great nation is destroyed. Take a look here at what we have in Revelation 8, verses 8 and 9. And the second angel sounded, and as it were, a great mountain burning with fire was cast into the sea, and the third part of the sea became blood. And there died the third part of the sea, the creatures which were in the sea, even they that had life, and the third part of the ships were destroyed. So it doesn't matter if you're on the sea or in the sea, in that third part, you will be destroyed. Now, let's take a look at this and try to get our bearings here. A great mountain. Mountain in a metaphoric literal in the Bible always represents a kingdom or a nation. Now it says a great mountain, which would give the implication that this is not an ordinary country, but a significant country that is being destroyed, a large country. And it says it was burning with fire and cast into the sea. So obviously it was part of the third of the earth that was being burned up. Now the relevancy of being cast here into the sea seems to suggest that it will no longer exist. It comes to an end. And therefore everybody within this nation living at that time will be destroyed. Of course, because of the blood or the poisons, like if you remember back to the time of Moses, the water turned to blood there with Pharaoh. They could not drink it. So the water becomes contaminated, and as a result, all the creatures in the sea and upon the sea die. And it is possible here with the reference to the ship that there could be tidal waves from the collapse of the burning mountain that destroyed this. So by the way, this is our third earthquake mentioned now. So now we got the third trumpet blast, and what do we have? Wormwood, which brings pestilence. It brings sickness. The water here is going to become bitter. We look at Revelation 8, 10, and 11, and the third angel sounded, and there fell from heaven a great star, burning as a torch. It fell upon the third part of the rivers, upon the fountains of the waters. And the name of the star is called Wormwood. And the third part of the waters became wormwood, and many men died of the waters because they were made bitter. So what do we have here? Well, let's talk a little bit about what's going on here. If you notice here, there fell from heaven. So in other words, the word fell here could imply something, or could be a remez. It fell upon a third. The idea, it wasn't cast, it fell. And it's fell from heaven. So this could be heaven in the sky, but it's talking about a great star. And the implication here is because it's talking about a star, it doesn't necessarily have to be a meteorite, a star, or an asteroid. It could be a fallen angel. Whatever it is, it's burning as a torch. And I like the idea that it uses the word it here because this again supports the idea that it could be a fallen angel. Because in Matthew 12, it says, when a spirit comes out of a man, it walks through arid, dry places, it looks for rest and doesn't find any. Then it says to itself. You see how many times it uses the word it? That is a good Bible translation that uses the word it. Some Bible translations use the word he here. but it is talking in an impersonable form. By falling on the waters and on the springs, what happens? Water moves. It's going to spread. It's going to be contaminating other water sources at the same time. And how do we know it's contaminated? The word here is wormwood. Oddly enough, back in the Ukraine, back some time ago, there was a nuclear power plant that got contaminated called Chernobyl. That's the word wormwood. So the waters now become contaminated, causing many men to die because of this bitterness. Now, this is mentioned is another birth pang. Let's just touch base real quick on the birth pangs that the Bible refers to. First of all, we have nation against nation. Okay, remember, Jesus here is talking to the apostles about the end of the age and the return of Israel. So we look at it today as that it's referring or talking about the church. It is not. It's talking about the restoration of Israel, what happens just before that brings about his return. So Syria attacked Iraq, attacked the Antichrist, nation against nation. Of course, the Antichrist also then attacks Egypt after Syria is defeated, and now you go kingdom against kingdom. Russian-led confederacy against the West, that confederacy. And then what happens? We've seen when the implementation of the kingdom of kingdom event happens, you have an earthquake in Israel from when the Russians fell upon the mountains and in the fields. So what is happening there is you have earthquake number one mentioned. You have earthquake mentioned with the casting of the golden censer to earth. There is an earthquake there from the explosions that are implementing with a third of the earth being burned up. You had in the second trump, you had an earthquake there when the mountain collapsed into the sea. It literally was an earthquake. So there are earthquakes now appearing. Then you're going to have in diverse places famines and pestilences. So if you notice now, with water, you can't drink it. You're going to become contaminated. You're going to become sick as a result of it. You're going to become diseased. Secondly, it waters a lot of the crops. So now crops are not able to get their proper nutrition, causing famine. So the crops are becoming less and less. And the final one we will look at in a second, beginning, it says there will be terrors and great signs from heaven. The fourth angel sounds his trumpet, and there is less light in the world. Now Revelation 8:12 tells us the fourth angel sounded, and the third part of the sun was smitten, the third part of the moon, and the third part of the stars, that the third part of them should be darkened. And in that day they should not shine, for the third part of it and the night in a like manner. So what we have here is we have either a third less light in total visibility, or possibly that you are only going to be able to see 2/3 of the sun, 2/3 of the moon, 2/3 of the stars during the day and during the night. Could that be caused by the burning and all the smoke going into the sky? I don't know, but we now are seeing signs in the heaven, another birth pang. So with this being the case now, Israel has been warned. The baby, the child is nearing being born. So we are getting close to the footsteps of Messiah. Again, I invite you to like this video, also share it with somebody you might think would be interested in. Great topic for unbelievers to hear, because they too need to know Jesus Christ. Lastly, subscribe, because the next trump that we are going to look at is a doozy. Whoa! Whoa! Are you kidding me? Wait a second, Lord. A third of the earth got burned up with all its trees and its grass and all that. A great nation just disappeared aflame and crumbled into the sea. And also, Lord, there's this famine and pestilences that have just showed up, and you don't call this a woe? Help me out, God. Tell me why that is. Well, this is what he says. And I saw and I heard an eagle flying in mid-heaven, saying with a great voice, Woe, 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 for them that dwell on the earth, by reason of the other voices of the trumpet of the three angels who are yet to sound. Now, this is crucial, but this is something that we have to cover in our next video, and that will cover the first of these three woes. One more woe, and that is our so now what? I always like to put an application, at least one, at the end of each video. And I want us to think about that silence for a half hour that is in heaven, because it is a must. I want you to think about people you know. Think about our friends. Think about us. Are we making the right judgments in our life? Are we truly saved and know Jesus Christ? Well, that woe is for anybody who is not a believer. So what we want to do is we want to communicate this message of the judgment that is nearing should anybody we love and know and care about is living at that time. That is a great application. Get the message out to other people that God must bring wrath on those who will not respond to his grace. I want to thank you and say God bless you. There are more playlist links in this video. Feel free to take a look at them. And again, have a wonderful rest of the week.